You know where your business would be without you. Imagine where it could go with more of you. Well, with Wix, you can create a website with more of your vision, your voice, your expertise. Wix gives you the freedom to truly own your brand and do it on your own, with full customization and advanced AI tools that help turn your ideas into reality. Scale up without being held back by cookie-cutter solutions and grow your business into your online brand. Because without you, your business is just business as usual. Take control. Go to Wix.com.
This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was getting frustrated by your forms. Now Taxes is uploading your forms with a snap, and a TurboTax expert will do your taxes for you. One who's backed by the latest tech, which cross-checks millions of data points for absolute accuracy, all of which makes it easy for you to get the most money back guaranteed. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
Welcome to the Media Roundtable Industry Edition, where we dive into the secrets of the craft and provide our perspective on industry topics, all in service of the marketers who are responsible for the success of their audio programs. We call them the Chief Audio Officers. I am longtime contributor, first-time host, James Ingrassia, EVP of Client Service at Oxford Road and Veritone One. Today, we are joined by our fellow agents of influence, Neal Lucey, EVP of Strategy and Product. Welcome, Neal.
Thank you. Feels like it's been a long time, but I'm glad to be back.
Glad to have you back. Also, a recurring feature on Media Roundtable is Spencer Semonson, Media Supervisor here. Spencer, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on your first hosted podcast, James.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Let's go easy today. And Kyle Jelinek, VP of Client Services. Kyle, welcome to the team here.
Happy to be here, James. Good luck. You're doing well so far.
Thanks. For 10 seconds in, we're doing great.
You're
All right, welcome
crushing
to
it.
the show, everyone. Let's just hop right into this week's top news stories. We got a few to cover, but we're first going to go through some honorable mentions. So first one is a kind of a lesson in don't burn your bridges when you leave somewhere, because Fox is betting really big on podcasts. And former Fox News stars like Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly are now back in the family. Neal, why don't you tell us a little bit about this one?
Sure. So Fox is expanding into podcasting, and they've done that by acquiring Red Seat Ventures. So they're a company that produces and sells ads most specifically on conservative-oriented podcasts. And it includes some notable former Fox stars like Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, and even Bill O'Reilly. So what I think the article is saying, this move allows Fox to profit from these personalities, some of them kind of left in questionable circumstances, without directly employing them. And it really reflects that Fox is making a bet on the growing importance of podcasts in both media and in politics, especially given the success that Trump saw in the 2024 campaign. So while traditional TV is still its main revenue source, Fox is seeing podcasting as both a hedge and a complementary business to its core TV operations. My hot take on this is, there's no question that podcasts had an outsized influence on the election. And if you don't believe us, go to oxfordroad.com and look for our white paper that speaks to the podcast election specifically. And if you don't believe that, read Ashley Carmen's really great reporting from Bloomberg, where she really dove into the podcast election and the particulars of it. So it totally makes sense that Fox would expand their footprint by getting these conservative podcasts. I think the one question I have, because it says they're not directly employing them, but if they bought the company, aren't they kind of the employers at the end of the day? I don't know. Seems that way. Maybe not.
Seems that way. Yeah, like it's really interesting. I feel like there has been a shift in the marketplace, like just being more open to these right-leaning podcasts across the board, mostly due to, I think, the podcast election. And I think Fox going in and buying Red Seat is a very interesting move on their part and probably very wise.
That's interesting because I mean, James, you and Kyle are really kind of talking to clients day in and day out. And
Right.
I'm sure you've experienced tons of pushback when it comes to conservative podcasts in the past. So have you seen that tide change recently? I mean, I think that we noted it, that we expected it would change in the white paper that was put out, but just curious kind of what you're seeing from your clients who may have been weary.
Boots on the ground. I mean, look, it's not like, all right, buy anything you want. But I think the conversations are happening now in a way that they haven't been in the past, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and I'll add to that too. We have a number of clients who kind of wanted to sit on the sidelines and not really get involved during the election. And then as soon as the dust settled in December, and late November, January, we got a lot of requests to kind of start dipping some toes and even some feet, some deeper into the political arena here. And we have some clients going as far as going as for Tucker, and some others. We have some who are just starting to go with some more safer bets there. But either way, there definitely is a tide turning. I wouldn't quite say it's a huge tidal wave yet, but it definitely is a tide turning to get more into this space. And I'll also add too, I think Fox made a really good move here because I know on the TV side, a lot of the smaller guys like the Newsmaxes and the OANs, they kind of started to eat their share. And I see the same thing happening on the podcast side, where a lot of these independents, either they're independent hosts or independent networks, are really getting big now. And Fox buying this kind of gets them back into that arena with two really big names. I mean, just today, I think I saw an article that the Midas Touch podcast dethroned Joe Rogan in terms of like total downloads. So like there is a growing interest in this political space, no matter which side you're on. And I think that everyone should really take note here and realize that it's here to stay, at least for the next few years. All right. Let's move on to the next honorable mention. This is the YouTube CEO. So usually podcasts aren't really mentioned in some of the big earnings reports from Google and everything, but this month, the YouTube CEO mentioned that podcasts are a 2025 priority with a focus on show discovery, which is arguably one of the most difficult things about podcasting. It's hard to find new shows. Neal, why don't you tell us about this one too?
Yeah, so YouTube CEO Neal, I really like that first name, by the way.
Good one.
And he spells it the right way, by the way, Neal. He's promising exciting updates for creators in the coming months with his 2024 plans that are centered around enhancing content discovery for users on YouTube. They've had YouTube, like without even really trying, has over 400 million hours of podcasts watched monthly on its service. They're expanding their tools to support podcasters. Interestingly enough, he mentioned that TV is now the platform's primary viewing device in the US, which I found surprising. I just would expect it would be mobile. And they're introducing more interactive features. So advertisers can benefit with the new formats, especially if you're watching on TV, with QR codes and pause ads. YouTube subscription services are also growing alongside its AI-powered tools like auto dubbing. Moen announced that by the end of this month, audio dubbing will be accessible to all creators in the YouTube Partner Program. So it's big news that really YouTube is actually starting to talk about podcasts because they've become the #1 platform for consumption without really almost trying, right? So it's like, what could happen if they actually put some effort into this. So I think that that's interesting that they're really going in on podcasting more so and trying to make it a better environment for creators. One request that we have, this might be a self-serving request because it would help our attribution. We'd love to see them accept RSS feeds, which would make it easier for podcasters to post their videos, and we don't mind it because when you use RSS feed, we can embed a pixel and we can understand for those embedded host-read ads how performance is coming from YouTube, which is difficult right now.
Neal, can you just, you mentioned auto dubbing. For those who don't know, can you explain what that is?
I wish I could really explain what that is, but I mean, I think it's, I mean, just through the use of AI tools, I mean, you have, it's, everything can be dubbed into different languages much easier. You have closed captioning available. So there's just a lot of flexibility it provides. And I think the biggest thing is if you can auto dub it into different languages, then you're reaching different people around the world. And that's one of the great things about podcasts. And kind of one of the things that we found is just translating your podcast into different languages is going to get you new audiences.
Definitely. Now, Spencer, I know you do a lot of work with the YouTube community in your role here. So what are your thoughts on this?
There's a lot of really interesting things in the article that I've seen, that we've talked about all the way back in 2023, especially when it comes to like the TV being the preeminent way that people take that in. So I think some people are actually attuning their media buy to what shows make sense more for an older demo that would be more on the TV versus the secondary device, which is more handheld. It's a younger demo. So it was interesting also in the article when they talked about utilizing the phone as a second screen. A lot of people who are buying, they want a pinned comment, they want something in the description. And for those thinking that the TV is the main way, they're not thinking about those things quite as much, but they do still matter, especially if you're in the comment section, being a part of the community, following the call to action, using the phone for a QR code. So that was all very interesting to see that they're actually thinking about that, to Neal's point, for the first time, because they have kind of lucked into being the preeminent podcast stronghold. Mostly, I would think, fueled by the discoverability, because other platforms have not figured it out. Spotify is putting all of their platform behind the strongholds of the Snapchat model and TikTok, but this one is more attuned to a TV audience. So that was really interesting to read through.
Great, thank you.
I mean, the algorithm right on YouTube for discoverability, I mean, it just has an amazing ability to serve you content once you start consuming something. It gives you more and more of that content. And I don't know about the rest of you. I don't get that same experience in other podcast platforms where it's just feeding me kind of the next episode or feeding me something related to what I'm consuming.
Not even close.
No, all good points there. All right, next topic here is now more than ever, a lot of the ad buyers are putting podcast ads to work right alongside other traditional media, whereas podcasts used to be a very niche offering. Now a lot of big brands are really taking advantage of it. I mean, personally, I've seen it or heard it when I listen to podcasts and I hear some pretty big global brands advertising in there, but they're not really doing post reads. They're just running commercials, which is a whole nother topic we can go off on. But Kyle, what are your thoughts on podcasting kind of growing up?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've been a part of it. I've been here at Oxford Road for 11 years. I've seen the article from Podcast News Daily starts with podcasting once supported by scrappy direct advertisers. Like that was us. We were in that. And it talks about like this transition more to the 360 model where we're doing Instagram posts, we're doing social media, we're doing video companion. And the interesting thing, at least from my perspective, is like 360 advertising on podcasts obviously makes sense. There's no doubt that having hosts integrate in different ways outside of the podcast is going to improve the efficacy of the campaign. The question is really like, how do we quantify that? How do we measure? And I think that's the rub that I've been on as a performance marketer, being able to quantify what that impact actually does. We've done a little bit with pre-post analysis, but I don't think there's a way to truly measure that impact. And that's something that I think the industry needs to start working on.
The ability to measure kind of holistically is really important. And I mean, one of the tools to do that, there's a variety of tools, but having a market mix model really allows you to see the performance of channels. And I'm not saying that the market mix model is like the be all end all. I've used them a lot in the past, and it's always a look back, but by looking back, you can make smarter decisions about where to invest your dollars in the future. And then you can see how those investments paid off. And when I was working on businesses where we had kind of a variety of media channels, we could see the performance of all the channels, even if we weren't managing particular channels. I worked on one brand that we didn't manage the podcast advertising, but we were able to run it through the model. And it always came out really strong in the model. And so it begged more investment in that channel based on the performance. So I think having MMM is really important. I saw on LinkedIn today, and this still surprises me, I don't think MMM usage is up to 50% of marketers yet. So it's still kind of not the norm to have a MMM in your arsenal. And then also just having brand lift and being able to parse out different channels, I think is really important as well.
Well, speaking of advancements in attribution, Spencer brings us a really interesting story from our friends down under in Australia. The audio networks down there are all unifying together around a digital audio ID. Spencer, why don't you tell us a little about that?
Well, the Edison Research Infinite Dial report has been published, and it says that Australia has surveyed 1,719 Australians, revealing that radio reaches 81% of respondents, which is 27% higher in the US, while listenership for podcasts has grown by 20% in the last 2 years, which means that Australia has the highest amount of listenership and the fastest growing market. I'm not quite the attribution nerd that some others on this call may be, but they did say in the recent article that the CRA Audio ID will enhance campaign targeting, reach, and efficiency, and will support the digital transformation of the audio industry as a whole. It will launch in June. The system will integrate with GfK's Radio 360 for better audience measurement. And this initiative aims to make audio advertising more accessible, effective, and data-driven for marketers. Right off the top, it's really quite interesting to hear that there's some country somewhere that still has a high amount of radio listeners, and podcast is growing in turn, which means that one is not losing from the other. Overall, they are still the audio geniuses that we know and love, which is why the market continues to grow. What, if anything, does this ID system mean? Neal, do you have some thoughts on this?
Well, at first, I want to say that I think that radio listenership is still pretty high in the United States, Spencer.
Oh, really?
So I'm going to challenge you a little bit. I know that radio adoption is higher outside the US, but let's not forget that a lot of people are still listening to the radio here. To me, if you have a unified ID, then you're able to see what an individual is consuming across digital platforms. And so you're better able to track that behavior. Probably really should have Giles on the podcast to get into like the details of it. But I think that I think it's important from the perspective, and I know this in Australia, like the audio, like the audio landscape, or like the consortium of audio kind of goes across like podcasts, streaming, and radio. In the US, like everybody is kind of individual, right? There's the Radio Advertising Bureau, there's like Sounds Profitable is kind of like the podcast, the voice of podcasting and others. So there seemed to be a much more coordinated country in terms of how they're looking at audio and trying to look at it more holistically and provide better solutions for marketers that way. So having a unified ID is a step that gets them closer to that. And really, it'd be great if we had kind of that closer working relationship between audio channels in the US, where you'd be able to better measure activity or what people are consuming and how they're reacting, be it radio, digital radio, streaming music, and podcasts.
Excellent. Thank you, Neal.
Have you ever heard of any of these companies? Shopify, Bayer, Oracle, Indeed, Masterclass, Babbel, Tommy John, LegalZoom, Constant Contact. We could go on, and we could go on so much further now that we're joining forces with our friends at Veritone One. We have created the world's largest specialist agency in audio and in podcasting. Nobody's ever done anything like this before, and it's an exciting opportunity for everybody involved. What we do at this agency is we offer comprehensive services for brands that are looking to break out and be successful in this space. We call you the chief audio officer because we believe that what you need requires real specialist work. And the way that we approach it includes proprietary methods in media planning and buying, analytics and attribution, insights. We have a proprietary process called Audiolytics, which is our trademark method for creative development that allows us to score ads for their persuasiveness. Audio isn't just the work that we do, it truly is our passion, and we aim to elevate this industry to new heights. And that's why we're the leaders in brand safety and suitability, as well as in volume in the space. We try to provide solutions that ensure that your ad buys align your values that you have as a brand with your business metrics that you need to be successful. This stuff is hard, but we're here to make it a little bit easier for you. And if you're a chief audio officer seeking best in market performance at maximum viable scale, please get in touch with us. Do the right thing. Go to oxfordroad.com. And if you're passionate about audio, if you're strategic, if you're relentless, and you're looking for a career change, consider joining our mission as an agent of influence. Send us your resume through our website, oxfordroad.com. We made it really easy to spell. Sign up for our free newsletter, The Influencer, and be sure to mention that you heard about us right here on the Media Roundtable podcast, because attribution is important. Thanks, everybody.
Making things, in the gray area as we're talking, I guess, right now. Let's move into some of our main stories here. Netflix, former male DVD company, is now considering video podcasts, as pretty much every streamer is chasing that creator economy. Pretty interesting. And we just came off the heels of saying that YouTube said that most of their consumption, or majority of their consumption, is on TV. This seems to settle in right there with that notion. Neal, tell us about this one.
Yeah. So if there's
First of all, nobody calls Netflix a former male company. Like, yeah.
I meant it just to say like how far they've come. They've won DVDs and by mail.
Yeah, we know, but former male company, like
Former male.
kind of a big deal.
It is a big deal. That's true.
All right. Yes, it's kind of a big deal. So Netflix is saying they're exploring, or it's reported that they're exploring video podcasts. And what it signals is a shift, kind of considering that, the success of creator-driven content. And really, I mean, you look at what YouTube is doing, and it makes sense for Netflix to kind of say, hey, we want part of that action. So they in the past were a little bit skeptical about podcasting, but that tune is seeming to change. Some of the appeal lies in lower production costs, the built-in audiences that creators can bring, And then, oh yeah, there's all that ad revenue that they can probably take advantage of too. So why not? Um, so they were started inquiring about top podcast hosts, even developing original content. So they're looking at ways to diversify their offerings. There aren't any official announcements, but it really aligns with what we're seeing in the industry trends, and you know, the streaming platforms are increasingly going to merge like digital and traditional together. For me, it's like I don't think I can get a break right now from discussing video podcasts. I thought, like, you know, there'd be a week that would go by where I couldn't talk about video podcasts, but it just doesn't seem to happen.
And
So
you'll hate our next story when we get to it. But
yeah, so the article mentions that podcasts are essentially the new TV talk shows. I really hope they're more than just that, and I think they're a lot more than that. And it's kind of a bummer that, like, that would be kind of the one of the takeaways. They're just, you know, the talk show format is just one part of the podcasting landscape.
I
Um,
on that point, it's just so funny. I was just talking with Dan, our CEO, about video podcasting, and we kind of came to a mutual agreement that if you take like Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel or something and just play the audio, it's not really a podcast. So for them to say that they're essentially the new TV talk shows, I have an issue with that. If you can't just listen to what's going on stage, then it's not a podcast. But the fact that they're talking podcast and talk TV talk shows, that's a little dangerous in my mind.
yeah.
Well, I would just, on the counter to that, is like, as it pertains to like culture, the late night TV was like every day people would go to work the next day and talk about like who was on whatever, the Tonight Show, let's say. Um, that's what podcast is replacing. Like, sorry, but nobody's watching the late night shows. If you look at the numbers, they've fallen off a cliff. And they've gone to podcasts. So even though it's not a one-to-one replacement of what those talk shows are, I think podcast is filling that void of the topic du jour as we talk about like what's going on in culture.
Well, what was interesting in the article too, they made specific mention that they had tried to do somewhat like talk show related things with celebrities or comedians in the past, and it had not worked. And it kind of reminds me of the big bets during the pandemic where they would get big celebrity hosts being like, this is going to make a great podcast. But if you don't have somebody who's a great host, who's a great interviewee, if that's the format, or somebody who's just actually interesting and can hold a loyal audience week after week, it's not going to work, which is why I think, again, they're wanting to go to somebody who already has built a base, like Alex Cooper, who they were negotiating for against SiriusXM earlier this year. So if they go with more personality-based people, they will have success. And also, they'll save a lot of money on production costs since they don't have to build anything in, similar to how sales networks work now.
Yeah, I have a point about the production costs, and I know we have a post. If you go to our LinkedIn page, we have a post about it and kind of talking about kind of the benefit of them expanding and this helping to offset kind of their premium content. The point in my view is part of the reason why Netflix has been so successful is that people the television industry has just gone after the cheap productions, right? So
Yep.
reality television kind of has flooded primetime TV. There's very little scripted television left. Really, there's not a ton of high quality scripted television. And that was an opening for Netflix, and they took it. And it's obvious because if you take a look at who's winning the primetime Emmys, if you in 2024, FX was number one, Netflix was number two. The traditional broadcast networks like ABC, NBC, CBS, they have just a handful. And I'm sure if you aggregate it over time, like Netflix and HBO Max, they will probably dominate in terms of Emmy Awards, and people will go find people, consumers aren't stupid. They're going to go find the good content. And if they have to go to Netflix to get it, they'll do that and they'll pay for it.
Excellent points. Thank you all. Switching topics, or actually staying on topics about video podcasting, but we are going to flip the script a little bit. This time we're going to talk about the podcasters and how they are measuring their video role or their video's role in growing their overall audience and reach. Spencer, why don't you take us through this one?
Yes, this is from DigiDay. Podcasters are using video content from audio forward podcasts to attract incremental audiences and grow viewership. Since there's no direct way to measure video's impact on podcast engagement, which we talked about earlier, publishers track overall audience growth across platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Companies like Vox, New York Times, and Wondery report audience increases due to the video efforts. Short-form clips promote shows, while full-length video episodes gain traction. And some publishers are integrating video into their apps, seeking video as a key strategy for audience expansion, planning for their investments in 2025. So all to say that if you want to grow a larger audience over time and you don't want to just put a static image on the video, but actually grow a second audience through the discoverability of YouTube or through integrating into that new platform, there is a way to do that. And we have it from the horse's mouth, actually from the podcasters themselves. And that's kind of a very interesting thing to note, since so many are mostly using video as a way to just gain more impressions and build a brand over time or be more clippable. What do y'all think about this? Does this feel legitimate? Do you have any questions about this? How do you feel?
I mean, from the performance side, I'm always looking at like, how do we measure the impact again? Same thing that we've been talking about. And for shows that are simulcast, we have a solution for that. We can back into performance based on what we do know. I guess my question is, are we actually sure that we're growing these audiences, or are we just getting them to new platforms? And I haven't seen enough really to substantiate either way.
That's a really good point there, because I guess they'd have to kind of look at the podcasters and the hosts and the networks would have to kind of look at their audio listening and then their video views aggregate, depending on where they are, and see if there's an overall lift. But to your point, is it more discovery, or are people listening and watching? Is it the same person there, or is it a whole net new audience? Like personally, I don't have the time or attention span to watch video podcasts. I only listen. But if I were to watch, I'd probably be watching the ones I listen to versus finding new ones.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of listening to a podcast and then going back and actually watching the YouTube of it because I wanted to see the interactions. Maybe I'm a weirdo, but I've seen that. I've done it. I do it often, actually. Spencer, you don't do that?
No, I, don't have that kind of time, but that's really interesting. You do that.
Fair enough.
No, I mean, like I said, if I watch it, I also listen to it because I have YouTube Premium. So if I watch it and I walk into another place, I get in the car, it's audio, and then I get to my next destination, it's video. It's more of, seamless for me. And I don't really listen to that many podcasts that I can't watch if there's a video component. It has to be useful. And to your point, Kyle, it's like, it really depends on like the creator and what the content is. You don't want daily news on a video platform that's audio first if it doesn't do anything. Like that doesn't do anything for me. It's already in the app. So it's interesting. I'm happy for the independents who are doing it and finding success through the discoverability tools, finding new audiences, or maybe it's because they're cross-promoting on their network or with new guests, and that's how they're able to do it. But overall, yeah, I still have a little bit of a feeling of suspicion.
Well said. All right, guys, we have our last topic here. Kendrick Lamar's performance at the Super Bowl was the most watched halftime show ever. And my bet is if anyone else's TikTok and Instagram Reels feeds are like mine, the audio from that performance is probably one of the most used sounds in the social world right now. But so what does that mean about audio? So as we all know, about 2 weeks ago, Kendrick Lamar took the stage of the Super Bowl halftime show. It beat out Michael Jackson's 1993 record of viewership, drawing 133.5 million viewers of that show. That's pretty crazy. He had 12 songs, including the viral Not Like Us, which is obviously the diss track against Drake, which some didn't know if he was going to perform or not. He had Samuel L. Jackson, SZA, Serena Williams, were all part of the big spectacle and stage production. Minimal set, which is fine. His dancers were pretty amazing with the powerful choreography and imagery. But as the first solo rapper to headline the event, it's just one of the best that's in all the rankings you see. But what does that mean for audio marketers? Bet you're wondering. Well, if you really look at how that all works, I mean, this is an artist that you either liked him or maybe you never heard of him before, or maybe you heard of him and didn't know his songs, but it is the music's ability to make a statement and provoke an emotional response. So many people who watched just heard some songs, thought it was okay. Many people who knew about his songs knew that there was special meaning to the order that they went in and the performances that went in them. So there definitely was many layers to this performance, which definitely stood out through many analyses online, through some social media, probably even some podcast hosts too, but social media stars out there that were kind of talking about all the things. Did you notice that? And this meant that, and all the Easter eggs that were in there. But it really just enforces the importance of music, not only just to complement your ad message, but to really help with that storytelling to create that impact and resonance with your ads. I mean, we talk about that all the time here at Oxford Road about the importance of sonic branding or a sonic logo or adding some kind of relevant audio when it makes sense to your ads. And I think if you think back to that performance, you probably have one of those 12 songs in your head as you're thinking about it. Or if you're scrolling through online, you could probably see some clips of it as well. But all leads back to just bringing everyone back to that moment. Happy to hear any thoughts that anyone has on the podcast here.
This is erroneous. There's no way that performance was better than Prince. I said it at a meeting last week. I'm telling you, I think cumulative views of the Prince halftime show have to supersede anything that this did. Kendrick's amazing. He's a storyteller. It was a spectacular halftime performance. Prince wins it hands down. I'm sorry. I don't care what the numbers say.
It's not a ranking of the best. It's who
I don't care.
got the most viewers.
I still don't care.
But I will say I'm on Team Prince. Like in
Thank
my
you.
view, Prince had by far the best Super Bowl halftime performance. It's like
Thank you,
there's
Neal.
Prince and then there's everybody else.
Was I alive when that
I-
happened? What year was that?
Oh.
You were alive. It was in pouring rain. He performed like it wasn't a drop in the sky. It's watch it and be blown away. Okay, Kyle, in your defense. So
Thank you.
Michael Jackson, I mean, that was 1993. So the population of the United States has grown significantly since 1993. So yes, he did get the most viewers, but if you think about it in terms of a percent of the population, it changes the things a little bit. So,
All right, I'll calm down. I just want to support
it's
Prince.
just like you can't compare box office, right? Because a dollar today is not the same as a dollar in 1990 or whatever.
Yes.
Kyle, I thought you were going to say Katy Perry and the Left Shark. Your favorite performance, but
Well, solid number 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just to be a little bit serious, I mean, the reactions to his performance, there's a ton of reaction, right? Good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's like, if you're a marketer, like what you're trying to do is evoke a memory. You're evoking an emotion, and music is one of the most effective ways to do that. There's tons of research out there that shows that music in advertising works better. There's tons of research out there that shows that having a sonic logo, a sonic brand, is going to make your commercials more memorable. It's going to make them distinct. So it's just a proof point that it's really important to really think through and take advantage of as a music as a tool in the arsenal to get your messages seen, heard, and remembered.
I mean, there was a study done, I think it was last year, that said that you have the most emotional connection to music that came out when you were like 16 to 19 years old. And so that's hence why like the 90s on 9 is my favorite Sirius XM station. So it's just like it all kind of makes sense. And it's why you see so many people who are trying to reach people in their mid 40s and early 40s right now are bringing back nostalgic songs from the 90s in their TV ads or their radio commercials now. It's the Backstreet Boys with some of the Tide or the Downy products, and you got Michelle Branch on Target commercials. It's all coming back 25 years later.
More Stay in the Time next year. We're gonna have that at the Super Bowl halftime. No,
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
All right, guys, guess what? We did it. So thank you for our team for taking part in this conversation. And thank you, whether you're listening or viewing, for joining the Media Roundtable. This podcast is brought to you by Oxford Road and Veritone One, where we want you to succeed in audio and creator-based media to influence for good. As members of the marketing community, we have the power to advance voices that don't just entertain, but they edify, to build bridges across differences and preserve fair-minded discussion around the most important topics of our age. If you are a marketer looking to align your brand values with extraordinary business outcomes, reach out to Oxford Road by visiting our website, oxfordroad.com. You can subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Influencer. And if you're a fan of this podcast, you have some suggestions or feedback, good, bad, and different, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at info@mediaroundtable.com. And one last plug here, don't forget to listen to Ad Infinitum. That is our very own creative focus podcast, which we do cover a lot of that sonic branding and sonic logos and everything. It's hosted by our VP of Creative Services, Stu Redwine. So if you're really in that audio lane and you want to hear all about the best work in creative for audio, listen to Ad Infinitum. We're pretty much available wherever you get your podcasts. So good luck and listen to that one. You can go back to listen from episode 1 to get a lot of great content. Thank you to our guests, Neal, Spencer, Kyle, and also to Haley, Ruby, Bianca, Kyle, Ezra, Mary Jane, Neal, Everett, and the team at Podcast One. And as always, influence responsibly.
So you've got a business, but what about a brand? The difference? More of you. Wix gives you the freedom to create your website, own your brand, and do it on your own, exactly how you envisioned it. Experience limitless customization. Boost your creativity and efficiency with AI tools for every part of your business journey. Scale up with built-in SEO, e-com, and scheduling features. Put more of you in your business. Go to Wix.com and do it all yourself.